is KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank.
Hello and welcome into another edition of 3 Maw. I am John Kurtz. We've got the full crew here today, joined by Derek Young from K-State Online, Cole Manbeck, former beat writer for the Manhattan Mercury, and we are talking about an absolute ass-kicking. K-State beats TCU 41-3. Wildcats rushed for over 340 yards. Both quarterbacks played pretty effectively. No real separation there. Defense throws up a game in which they do not allow a touchdown. So lots of positives to break down here today. And it certainly calls for raising your glass of 360 vodka or Ben Holiday bottled in bond bourbon from our friends at Holiday Distillery. Yes, whichever one you need for Saturday. It's 11 a.m., a little earlier. Whatever cocktails you're going to be whipping up at the tailgate for the Houston game this Saturday, make sure you're using your 360 vodka or your Ben Holiday bottled in bond bourbon. And we will see you out there at Bill Snyder Family Stadium on Saturday. Get stocked up for the rest of tailgate season and support those who support us with our friends at Holiday Distillery. Cole, did you throw back a couple of Ben Holiday bottled in bond bourbons on Saturday after the game?
I did, actually. I was having a couple before the game and felt well enough finally to do it again. It was an up and down week with battling some sickness, but felt well enough pregame Saturday finally by around 4 o'clock that I had a couple. So
never too sick for a little booze, you know. That's
cleared the sinuses right up. And then we had Wyatt at the Cats for Play Classic, the Wildcat NIL event at Colbert Hills, making some wonderful mule drinks with 360 vodka out there on the course, supporting K-State as well, and serving some delicious drinks. He was a popular guy. So, yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, when you got the booze, you're going to be a popular guy. That's generally how it works. Man, I mean, complete effort for this team. The quarterbacks took a lot of the focus during the week and what was going to happen there. And honestly, I mean, it's certainly a storyline from the game, but it was just the story of the game is how much K-State completely dominated both lines of scrimmage, I would say. I mean, 342 rushing yards, Cooper Beebe out there talking smack on Twitter, which I love, throwing it back at TCU, and then got a ton of pressure on Josh Hoover, TCU's quarterback, throughout the game. Never made his life easy at all and held TCU off the board, at least from a touchdown standpoint. So I don't know. I mean, this is as complete an effort as we've seen since, Oklahoma State last year, probably. I mean, certainly gave you those kind of vibes.
Baylor was up there as well. Both of those games, I would say, that was 31-3. Oklahoma State was 48-0. This was 41-3. It certainly is in that neighborhood and rivals what those two games kind of produced. It's hard to pick out a flaw in the ointment, so to speak. Like you said, they dominated the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. You know, one of my takeaways immediately after the game in the feature that I wrote was that I didn't remember the last time that Josh Hoover threw with his feet set, even if there wasn't actually sacks being produced. And I think that's pretty impressive because you could tell that he's not the most comfortable when moving in the pocket, or at least having to move the pocket. He needs to kind of be back there and unimpeded, which is not, unnormal for a redshirt freshman, which is why I thought that would be one of my keys. I thought BYU allowed him to sit back and kind of just do what he wanted to do, and that's why he had the big day there. He still threw it a ton. He almost threw it 60 times versus BYU. He threw it over 40 times against Kansas State. But think about what that yards per attempt is when you attempt 43 passes and only throw for 187. 5 yards a carry, just because I think there was 2 big ones from Amani Bailey. You say big with perspective. I think it was 35 yards, and another one was something else, probably close to that. But the defense also is starting to eliminate the big plays. You got to think about it. They were giving up probably 4 or 5 over 30 yards a game. This one, I think it's only 1 or 2. So progress being made there offensively. The passing game showed flashes, which is more than what it had been doing. I wouldn't say it was marvelous, but it showed some flashes. You had your one quarterback look pretty good, like he was starting to figure some things out, even though there was some flaws with Will Howard. Probably 2 or 3 throws where you could pick nits there and say, what's kind of going on at this point? And then Avery Johnson probably ran into some freshman mistakes here and there on a couple of his dropbacks as well. But then you run for 6.6 yards carry. Cole will probably talk about it, but they're starting to get into school record-breaking history in terms of what they're doing on the ground. 6.6 is only helping that per rush. And then Jace Brown breaks out a little bit at the receiving, which is good to see because you needed somebody to kind of be explosive. Now, he's reception-wise, he's right there with everyone else, what typically they have produced. But in terms of, getting open in the red zone or producing separation down the field, we hadn't seen a lot of that. Jaden Jackson a couple times, even though the quarterback had missed him a few times earlier in the year, and then Garrett Oakley the one time where Will Howard missed him. But there just hasn't been a lot of those. And Jace Brown provided that, which is nice because you need somebody to boost that element of the offense.
I think you have to go back to the Troy game, DY, for a wide receiver to catch a vertical ball like Jace Brown did. And that was Jaden Jackson, like you mentioned. I can't remember a wide receiver catching a ball vertically on a fly like Jace.
Sure happened against UCF, but yeah.
Yeah. So we can talk about Jace Brown more in depth, obviously, as well as this show goes on, because that's a big story potentially developing as well and getting a real weapon there at wide receiver. 3 points by TCU. I started going down this rabbit hole, guys, yesterday, and learned that the 3 points are the fewest scored by TCU in a game since 1993. Texas A&M and their season finale. Kept going year by year. Look, maybe I did miss one, but I went through every season year by year and came to 1993, the last time that they scored 3 points or less in a game. So shout out to the Kansas State defense, 4.3 yards per pass for Hoover after he threw for 439 the week before against BYU. You mentioned it, DY. They completely bottled him up, and I think he had 132 yards passing going into that last drive of garbage time in the game when Sonny Dykes was calling timeouts, trying to punch it in, which, by the way, felt really sweet to not let them get in the end zone.
It did.
That was particularly enjoyable. Kansas State's offense, obviously 41 points. And, we talked about it on the last show. K-State now is number 10 nationally in the SP Plus offensively. And so while there had been some frustrating moments this year, particularly the Oklahoma State game, that is feeling more like the outlier. They've scored 40 or more points in every home game so far this year.
So it would be. Everybody has a bad game.
Yeah. And I think so. KSU fan tweeted this out yesterday, the all season drive charts, points per drive, and K-State is number 1 in the Big 12 for the entirety of the season. And points per drive scored at 3.31, ahead of Texas, ahead of Oklahoma. They're number 1 or they're number 3 in the Big 12 in points per drive differential, which takes the offensive points per drive and defensive points per drive and gives you that differential. They're at 1.57 there. The next closest at number 4 is KU, I think, at 0.68. So there's a pretty considerable gap there. This team is playing good football now. Last 2 games, we talked about running the football. You mentioned it, DY. They're now at 5.62 yards per carry on the season. That ranks number 7 in the country. 233 yards per game on the ground. That ranks number 3 in the country. That's number 1 among all Power 5 schools. And the 5.62 yards per carry, the most that I had found for a yards per carry in a season by a K-State team was in 2016, which was 5.3. So they are considerably higher than that number right now with what they are doing offensively. 4 straight game over 200 yards on the ground. Last time they did that was 2016 when they had 7 straight games at 200 yards on the ground, and the 343 rushing yards ties for the second most in the Chris Kleiman era at Kansas State. They rushed for 343 against Texas Tech last year and rushed for over 360 against Nichols in the season debut or the career debut at Kansas State for Chris Kleiman.
And I'm looking at this because I just caught this stuff too by looking at the stats page. If you do it sack adjusted, they ran for 7 yards a carry, 356 yards. And then I didn't catch this until now, and it's probably more of a black eye on me than anything. They were 10 of 13 on third down.
So DY, they are number 7. Let's see here. They're number 7 in the country at third down offense on the season now at 53%. Their third down defense is 15th in the country at 30%. And I meant to mention this on the rushing yards for K-State's offense. And the first 5 games, they had 30 rushes of 10 yards or more. In the last 2 games, since they started playing both quarterbacks, they've got 29 rushes of 10 yards or more. They had 16 against TCU. They had 13 against Texas Tech.
So far, that QB run game has opened up things for Ward and Giddens a little bit in the backfield, but at some point, it's going to open up the passing game as well.
Yeah, well, and that's, I mean, you guys have brought up a lot of thoughts here. First of all, K-State beef, man. I mean, shout out. We had frustrations with them early in the year, but clearly they're doing a hell of a job that seems to have come together. Even like Carver Willis, a guy that we talked about struggling early on in the year, seems to have gotten a lot better. I mean, there's just a lot of praise that needs to go around to the offensive line and the job that they have been doing. I also think it is funny to sit here, like, we've had so many frustrations with the offense throughout the year, and yet you rattle off these numbers, and it's like, what have we really been doing, particularly with some of the offenses that K-State has had in the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years. But to me, that really is all about, we expected the passing game to be better, right? Because you saw an improved passing game last year down the stretch. That was how they were winning games. Like, Will was throwing it down the field and getting vertical all the time, and you felt really good about all the threats that you had out there. It's just that we expected it would be more of the same there and not back to like quarterback run and pounding people on the ground, right? That has to be creating this perception that the offense has been struggling for a lot of the year.
I would agree. Yeah, some of it's expectations. Some of it is the passing game not being pretty. And some of it was just an overreaction to one game, I would say, too, because the passing game didn't look abhorrent or abysmal other than that one game. Now, there's games where it's like, man, it's got to be better, but it only looked abysmal once. I mean, even against TCU, we're talking about this run game. I mean, the quarterbacks combined to go, like, you'd like to see better efficiency, but they combined to go 15 of 26 for 244 yards and 4 touchdowns. So now some of that is throwing at 2 yards and the other guy running at 70, but hey, it counts.
Well, yeah, you had the swing pass. You also had Avery Johnson gets credit for a touchdown pass on an option pitch that went forward. So,
yeah,
I mean, yes. But yeah, I mean, the 2 swing DJ Giddens had about 80 yards on 2 swing passes, right? It felt like
think about what Deuce did to TCU last year. I just, I don't understand why they don't defend the running back out of the backfield.
They clearly saw something on film. That was open every single time. That was wide open. And let's see here.
Cole, the other thing I'll slip into is like jet sweeps. They were utilizing a lot too. Like, they clearly found something like on the edge in space with TCU that wasn't working, and they just went to it over and over again. I was just amazed. Like, I don't know what Joe Gillespie is doing or what they're paying him for on the TCU sideline, but they couldn't make any adjustment to stop any of that.
That's a good point, John, because these are the wide receivers that also had carries on jet sweeps. Jace Brown, Keegan Johnson had 2, Phillip Brooks, Jaden Jackson. They ran 5 carries to 4 different wide receivers.
No, you're forgetting one very important wide receiver who had a carry on a jet sweep, Cole.
Oh, yes, Avery Johnson. So you can add 5 in there as well.
Troll job. What a troll job.
Yeah. I love that. That was amazing.
All week, who's going to start? And Colin Klein's like, middle finger.
Yeah.
The TV broadcast was funny because they're like literally talking about like, okay, now who do we see at quarterback? And literally you see like Will jog out onto the field, and then the camera catches Avery like lagging behind, also walking out onto the field. So like you're watching that, and I was like, man, I can imagine that just had to blow people's minds. Like, what is happening? Anyway.
Yeah, I think about a trivia question. A few years, Avery Johnson's first career start came as a wide receiver.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. And Cole, do you remember when they threw Daniel Singleton like an eye back for Jake Waters one time?
I knew exactly. You can't keep the name out of his mouth every time we talk about this. So
I'm saying it's been done before. Okay, so it's not completely novel.
I remember. Yes.
Well, look, good vibes. I would say the quarterbacks to me now, I just said like, hey, all these numbers are great, and we kind of nitpick the offense and complain about the offense. I mean, it's still, again, it's the inefficiency of the passing game where I'm still a little bit like, it's leaving something to be desired, but it doesn't matter if you're running the ball like that. I think the obvious concern is going to be, can you run the ball like that on everybody? Like, TCU, UCF, you've had tremendous games on the ground against Texas Tech too. Worth mentioning there. But that I think will be the question moving forward. So we'll get into that in just a moment. But of course, we have to thank our friends at Home Field Apparel for supporting the pod. All the great gear that you see us wearing all the time. Cole has panned his camera down right now to the shirt that I hope to be receiving very soon with the old school basketball logo with the script Cats. DY's got Cocaine Willie on the K-State sweater that he is rocking right now. So everybody's got the home field on except me. I messed up today, guys. I'm sorry. We started a little early, so I was just trying to hurry and just grab what I could find. But I should have been wearing my home field. If I went to homefieldapparel.com and used promo code 3MOD23, I'd get 15% off my first order. Hint, hint. So use promo code 3MOD23, get 15% off your first order there, whether you're getting any K-State gear, which they have a ton of stuff and a ton of new, fresh, updated stuff. Or if you're going to get something from one of the 100 plus other schools that they have, get to homefieldapparel.com. We're back with more next.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network. Make sure you download our new app. Find it on the App Store or Google Play. Just search KC Sports Network.
I guess on the note of what we were talking about there and how much this is a replicable thing that the offense can do moving forward. I mean, to me, it is great to be running the way that you are on the ground. And like Trayshawn Ward, I think is another guy that deserves mention again. He still just looks to me like he has so much more juice the last couple of weeks than he did the first month of the season. But the biggest story of the game to me on offense is absolutely Jace Brown. Like, you had a receiver break out and somebody that has more explosiveness, more speed, and just, again, more juice, like more pop to him. The route that he ran to get open in the end zone where he, fakes like it's going to be like a corner and then comes back on like a post. I mean, that was like some Tyler Lockett stuff, man. Like the route running that he would have to create separation all the time. It was very refreshing. It was very refreshing to see a receiver make a move on a guy who was right there and get himself open. And the fact that he is just a freshman, super encouraging for this year and for the future. So tip of the cap to Jace Brown, giving me a little bit of renewed optimism about what the offense can be.
Yeah, I mean, we could have mentioned for a few times. I know Cole as a source was kind of saying it, and I had a couple that Jace Brown was going to be able to kind of make a mark, on this offense at some point, just because he provided a trait that wasn't really evident or existed in the guys that they were using, just because it hadn't come together yet for Keegan Johnson. That was part of it as well, and Jace Brown went out there and showed that speed and explosiveness and an ability to attack down the field that was lacking in the Kansas State offense. Part of it is that he is that good, and he's going to continue to be used more and more as the season moves along, and hopefully he's a consistent and reliable weapon in that way for the remainder of the year. Part of it's because TCU probably didn't know anything about him. So all they did was run man coverage at him, and he made him pay. The few times where they did throw some zone at him, he looked a little bit more confused and not necessarily know what to do exactly in those situations. Couldn't find the pocket, couldn't find the spacing. So that's obviously probably the element where he's going to have to show the most improvement, because he's going to see more of that the more film he puts out there for other teams to see.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, John.
I was going to say, part of the issue with the receivers has just been nobody can get open against man coverage, right? So just having somebody who can get open against man coverage, and we expect, like you said earlier, hey, the running game opening up more and more with QB run and what they're doing should eventually help you in the passing game. It should eventually help you get some more one-on-one sort of opportunities there.
Yeah, because you're going to lose the safety over the top if you have to dedicate more guys to the run.
Yeah. I mean, and you do all this with Ben Sennett not catching a pass, got dinged up. DY, do we think he's okay?
He's going to ask.
He tried to go back in one time and then have that kind of limp off. But the limps to me didn't look like particularly trouble, and that just looked like an ankle sprain where they just shut it down because they could. And he went into the locker room. I thought he went in and got a tape job and went out, and it didn't work.
Yeah, and when he went into the locker room, I watched him. He jogged up the ramp just fine.
I'm not too concerned. I bet he misses a couple practices, but I'm not too concerned.
Yeah, and I mean, this would be I shouldn't overlook Houston, so I shouldn't say this, but I was like, all right.
If he can go, he should go.
All right. I was just going to say, it feels like a letdown spot for Houston here coming off their Super Bowl against Texas. We know that game is super important to them, and they almost had it. Man, it's too bad.
Can we talk on that? What the hell was that spot on third down? Dana was right to be hot about that in post game. They got screwed. It should have never come down to a fourth down play. Yeah, I mean, they got the first down. They got the first down on third and short.
But John, the Big 12's out to get him. The refs are out to get him.
Correct. Believe me, I was all over it on the YouTube show last night, Cole, about
Oklahoma got some calls too.
Oklahoma got a call at the end of the first half, a bullshit pass interference call that got them 3 points, and they won the game by 2. Yeah,
and on the
the
Drake
league
Stoops-
is
By the way, we're looking way ahead here. But if Kansas State were to play, say, hypothetically, Oklahoma in the Big 12 title game, Oklahoma struggling against UCF's offense has to make them completely a little worried if they had to play Kansas State's offense. Those have some similarities in terms of what they do in the run game.
Well, and considering John Rice Plumlee still couldn't move and they still had trouble. I mean, Oklahoma gets away with a blatant hold on the go-ahead touchdown with Drake Stoops. I mean, God, just get out of here with that garbage. I think it's just hilarious. It would have been so funny, and it's still kind of funny that both those schools nearly lost to the newbies in the league on the same day. So it's too bad at least one couldn't have gone down. But anyways.
Hey, the Hawks are going to get Oklahoma this weekend, Cole. BYU can come in and get Texas.
I worry about KU right now where they are. But Cole, I think you were on Jace Brown.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah. So actually now over the last really 4+ quarters of football that Jace Brown has played, he's got 3 catches of over 20 yards. He had a 20+ yarder against Texas Tech. He had 2 in this game. Obviously the route for the touchdown, John, was phenomenal. The throw on the 3rd and 10 from Avery was a thing of beauty on that 40+ yard pass. And then I think my favorite catch of the day though was the ball toward the pylon. Just because when Avery released it and Jace Brown was fighting through contact and made that play, which, by the way, I don't really know how that's not DPI considering the one on Will Lee that was called earlier in the game or the next series. But it doesn't matter. He caught the ball. I just thought Jace Brown provides a different element for this offense. He's a true freshman. I think it's funny that shows my recruiting chops and how stupid I am, DY, that maybe Jace Brown was the wide receiver out of the 4 they landed in the 2023 recruiting class that I might have been maybe least excited about. And now he looks to be the guy to be most excited about in that class with Trey Spivey not far behind. And then you got Wesley Watson and Andre Davis who are going to redshirt this year. So Jace Brown, roommates with Avery Johnson. Avery said on our podcast last week that he's maybe his best friend on the team or one of his best friends. And it sure seems like they got a special connection. And that could be a special duo in the future for long term.
Yeah, well, how about, the freshmen that are contributing the most from this class? Outside of Avery Johnson, obviously, which I think we expected would probably happen. It's Austin Romaine and Jace Brown. And nobody paid much attention to them at all in that recruiting class. And I know Romaine was a little limited too, if we're talking about injuries. Did he play?
No, I don't think
he didn't play.
No.
I know I heard Kleiman said it was limited that he'd be able to. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he said it wasn't a certainty, and obviously he nailed that one. Chris Kleiman did. Romaine's playing well. I thought Jay Clifton might have even outplayed what he had been throwing on the field, at least at middle linebacker, probably because Clifton got the full week there at practice, was able to inundate himself a little bit more in it. The guy playing 3 spots. I can see sometimes where he's got to work himself into it a little bit. So another guy, Jay Clifton was another guy I thought really deserved probably some kudos for his performance. The Austin Romaine thing, probably not long-term. Probably. It is a long-term. It wouldn't be a shock for him to play against Houston. And, Jack Fabris was another one of that true freshman class that was probably at the bottom of the barrel in terms of ranking. I think he might be a little dinged up just because he didn't make the trip to Lubbock. So usually that's a sign of where that is too. But that's another true freshman that probably wasn't, very lauded in terms of recognition or ranking, having the spotlight on him. But he's cracked through. And guys that aren't playing regularly, but that clearly have impressed the coaches enough to be traveling, to be mentioned on a regular basis. Another one would be Chidi Obiizer. And I think he has a bright future as well. Actually, that game probably meant a lot to him just because his brother plays for the Frogs.
Rex Van Wy got some snaps at the end of the game, man. Little pass breakup.
Started to come along. He could be a weapon once everything starts to click for him. I think he actually has a pretty bright upside just because, that's a linebacker. It's about 6'4", and a wingspan's probably even longer. That's why he's able to get a hand on a few of those passes that you saw.
Yeah, junior college transfer who hadn't played yet this year, but they're planning to hopefully redshirt. Maybe they can still squeeze in 3 more times with him.
He only played 1 year at JUCO ball, so he's only 1 year, 1.5 years removed from high school football.
Right. But they still, I think that was his first game, right, DY? So they can use him for 3 more if they need to.
Yep, but he made the trip to Stillwater and Lubbock, so you knew that one was start to head in the right direction.
Yeah, that's good news. It's good news. And
from a depth standpoint,
yeah, and it's good that you could rest Romaine and just hopefully get him closer to 100% for the Houston game and going the rest of the way, and not really miss a beat on the defensive side of the football. And you got Will Lee back, and he's out on the field for a considerable amount of snaps. And I wonder
on the the accelerator that you'll lighten it up a little bit on Desmond Purnell and Austin Moore, because those two have played a lot of snaps the last 3 weeks.
Yeah, they have. Desmond Purnell, man, just playing really good football this year for this team. And I also got to say, I mean, I think Keenan Garber's really starting to play some really good football too. So, yeah. I mean, you don't even see, they hardly throw at him. So
he's a guy that was getting attacked a little bit in man coverage early in the year, and I think teams have found out that they really can't do that. You'd like to see his zone coverage improve a little bit and kind of know the depths and everything. But in terms of man coverage, he's on his P's and Q's right now.
Yeah, the defense is doing a lot of good things. Before we get to the defense, maybe we should go take a break. But when we come back, I do want to cover just the quarterbacks and get off of that, and then we'll get to the defense because they deserve a ton of praise, obviously, in a game where they only give up 3 points. But we are back with more chatter about the QBs coming up next.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network. Make sure you download our new app. Find it on the App Store or Google Play. Just search KC Sports Network.
So I know Chris Kleiman after the game had a quote DY in the postgame press conference that left us being like, all right, like what exactly does this mean as far as if they're going to continue to do this at quarterback with both rotating series or those from here? I'll just let you explain how you interpreted what Chris Kleiman had to say about it after the game.
Yeah, I guess I can provide a little bit better context and interpretation of what entirely went down. I think, and I'm pretty certain, and I forget who asked, it was talking about, essentially this alternating every series, because that's what Avery Johnson Will Howard did throughout the game, alternated every single series. Can you do that going forward? He says, or will you do that? He says, I don't know. I don't think so. And I think the question probably, it seemed like a throwaway question to him. He's zipping through these questions. He wanted to get out of there as fast as possible. So I don't think that was a lot of thought was put into it. But for me, it was just like one of those things. It's like, I think we understand, because personally for me, even as a fan, as a media member, I don't remember the last time any team actually alternated every single series with quarterbacks. So I think Chris Kleiman was probably referring to that specific detail and saying, this is probably not sustainable. And it's certainly not. Maybe it would be against Houston if they can't stop you, regardless of who is at quarterback as well. You could do that and keep the mystery alive even further to give Texas, a little bit more preparation. But I think going forward, it doesn't matter how much you play Will, how much you play Avery. I mean, it does for Kansas State in terms of what they're going to do as a plan. But for an opponent, they know that they're going to have to prepare for both a lot, no matter what. And I don't think any ratio is going to really shift that thinking between now and when they play anybody that remains on the schedule. So what I will say is I agree with Chris Kleiman in the fact that you're not going to be able to have this kind of ratio, probably not close in some of these games coming up, that in tight games, you got to pick a quarterback and go. Like if it's like 24-20, you can't just say, oh, it's your turn. Now it's your turn. That doesn't work. You're going to have to pick a quarterback and go at some point. What I would say, and what Chris Kleiman, I think, would agree with at this point, is you're going to need both.
Yeah, I think initially, when I said I was texting with you after the game, DY, and I saw that quote, and I think I just didn't have the full context of it, because when I read it, I was like, oh, he's saying we're not going to rotate at all anymore. It's going to be one guy moving forward, and whoever that guy is going to be the guy. And I was like, well, if they chose Will Howard, does that mean they're not going to get Avery Johnson's explosiveness on the field? Because that's a mistake to me. But then as I dug in more and I saw other people explaining it, and now your explanation, it just sounds like that obviously it's not sustainable to rotate every series. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen rotating.
No, I don't think I either. And to be honest, it's probably not sustainable to even come close to rotating every series. So you do have to pick one at some point and then sprinkle in the other.
Yeah, and I can get on board with that. I just, that was.
If there's going to be 100%, like 100-0 ratio, because you need what Avery provides probably a little bit more than what Will provides. If you had to go 100-0, you'd have to go Avery.
Did Kleiman say after the game, was that the plan going in to rotate every series, or was it because it just started working? It was just working so well that they just were like, I'll keep doing it.
They went in with this basically a little bit different, but essentially, and I'll pat myself on the back for calling this, essentially the same plan for the Texas Tech game. Will gets the first series. Now, they did first 2 in Lubbock, I believe, but Will gets the first series, Avery gets the second, and then we'll go from there. That was the only plan they had.
Yeah, well, worked out pretty damn well. But I agree, it gets tricky. I mean, that is the only thing like coming out of this game. And I know I'm trying not to be very negative about much of anything at all here, but you are
they order on themselves, right?
Yeah, yes, it feels like the quarterback can at best has been kicked down the road, and at worst has been made more difficult to decipher what exactly you're going to do.
Good kind of difficult. I'm not criticizing anyone, but like, because Will seemed to figure at least a few things out and showed some growth forward, and Avery still had flashes. It's like, man, we're at the same spot we were at the Texas Tech game, except now it's a little bit even more challenging of what to do moving forward. I'm happy for Will that he hung in there, was a good teammate. You knew that he would, and then had some success as well. And yeah, it'll be interesting. I think Houston will probably be the same, but I don't know. You're going to have a plan, because at some point you're going to get kicked in the mouth. One of these quarterbacks is going to get punched in the mouth, get kicked in the mouth. And what do you do when you meet that adversity? Because since you've started this basically 2 quarterback system, you've met very little resistance and adversity. So what happens when you do? That will be how we know the coaches are going to manage this 2 quarterback situation. Because another reason why I say it's not sustainable, it's easy to screw up. This is not an easy thing to manage. Like, I know people are going to be jumping down the coach's throats at the very first sign of mismanaging it, but this is a hard thing to do, and that's why I said it's not sustainable, and why at some point they got to be ready to go out there and pick that guy when the time comes, because it's going to come.
Yeah, it is, like in Austin. Well, it may happen, this week. I don't want to discount Houston. Obviously, you just pushed Texas to the wire, but say you're in Austin and you get down by 10 points in the first half, and the offense is throwing. Yeah, what do you do at that point? And I think the part of the reason we say it got potentially more difficult here is it's like both quarterbacks played well, but you also saw like the exact things that have you with some reservations about each. I mean, Avery Johnson, I love the flashes that we see. Obviously, he had some really explosive looking runs. Like, he was a shoelace tackle away a couple of times from busting like the really big one, and dropped a dime in the bucket on the one pass to Jace Brown that Cole referenced earlier. High level stuff there. But then at the same time, there's a sequence where he takes a really bad sack because he thinks he can run around somebody and can't. And then literally, I think it was right after that, he picks up a delay of game. So, just some freshman moments that you're going to experience with him. And with Will, it was like, we talk about inefficiency in the passing game. It's like that Will's the guy where you're like, I mean, you should be efficient in the passing game. Like Avery Johnson, I can understand some of that a little more, some of the misses, but you need Will to be more efficient passing the football to feel really, truly confident about it. I think it was a small step forward probably as far as that goes, but still definitely not where you'd ultimately like it to be.
Yeah, Avery had the delay game. He took that sack where he shouldn't because he thought he could get around a guy. I think he had 1 or 2 balls where he kind of threw as like, he kind of got away with something there as well in terms of 2 incomplete passes. And then with Will, he had a ball in the first half that I thought was an example of what was hurting him, in the first few games. And I think he had Keegan Johnson kind of broke free down the field for what could have been a touchdown. It would have been close, but he catches that ball. He has space to at least make a run at the end zone. And instead, he throws it late to Phillip Brooks along the sideline. And because it was late and because it wasn't really the right read or right decision, and nearly gets picked off. So you still, like I said, I mean, it's hard to nitpick that game. You won 41-3, and both guys played really well for the most part. But they both had moments that they'd like to have back, and I think Will Howard agreed with that after the game.
You talk about how the vibes could have changed in that stadium. That was the first drive, DY, and if that's an interception for Will, that's a tough spot, man. And it was behind Phillip Brooks. It was late, and Yeah, just the thing with Will, there weren't a ton of passes like, stretching the field, right? Like what was the pass to DJ Giddens was a 60-yard swing pass that was basically a lateral. There weren't a lot of balls thrown downfield. The big explosives in the passing game in terms of air yards per throw were from Avery Johnson, and then but Avery made some mistakes too. There was the fumbled exchange on the very first play, which I don't know whose fault that was, or just that's going to happen at times, and K-State falls on it. Credit to Avery Johnson for that happening on his very first snap, and again, not rattled, and they go right down. And
yes, Howard lost the snap too. I just thought about that. The snaps weren't ideal.
Yeah, there were some wild snaps that were coming back there. There were a couple other that Will had to snag as well that weren't ideal, and I didn't like a couple of the hits Avery took. That's for sure. There was the one where I was shocked he got the first down, guys. The one where he got pile drived up in the air and then slammed to the ground, but he got the first down on it, and then he got landed on a couple times pretty hard, and then a cheap shot by a TCU guy on a personal
Just about
foul.
to say, are we shocked that I saw that and immediately I was like, bleeping TCU, man.
I know what the plan has to be when Avery's in the game. You have to incorporate that. It was just a hair more, especially late, than I'd like to see in terms of QB called run.
Yeah, that would have been a time especially like his last series. I just would have liked to let them see in the passing game.
Let him zip it around, and maybe don't give that last series to Will. Is even what I was thinking.
Yeah, I was surprised Jake Rubley wasn't on the field at that point, to be honest.
I would have, to be honest. What was it? I'm 34-3 going to the fourth quarter. I would have made the fourth quarter entirely Avery Johnson.
That would have made sense.
I wouldn't have gotten to Jake Rubley either. Like, I know people were calling for that, and I get it. It's sentimental. But, man, if you want to use Avery, and they have to use Avery, like getting Jake Rubley reps would be stupid at this point. You're going to play Avery Johnson the rest of the year. That kid needs to play right now and get as many reps as possible.
Yes, correct. Get live reps with the bullets flying. I agree 1,000%.
There was no reason for Will Howard to play late, and there was no reason for Jake Rubley to play late.
I mean, honestly, is any of it, maybe this is a little conspiratorial, but is any of it thinking like, hey, if Avery goes in and really lights it up, tears it up, like we're just going to hear the roar even louder of you need to be playing this guy full time? Is there a concern with something?
I mean, because they were already getting that. The kid had 5 touchdowns last week, didn't have one this week. So,
DY, did Keegan Johnson get hurt in the first half? Because I didn't think he played a snap in the second half. Or do you think that was them just the game was in hand, they didn't need him, and they decided to rest him? Because
your guess is as good as mine on that one. I feel like something happens every game.
Yeah,
I'm gonna say Cole.
I know, John, you're frustrated.
Back to what I said about a month ago. I'm just at this point, if you get something from him, that's gravy. That's great. I don't think you can really count on it.
What I will say, John, is there's been multiple times this year where he was wide open for a huge play and they didn't throw it to him. Like that happened against Troy. It happened against, and then it happened on Saturday. So there have been, I'm sure Keegan is frustrated too. I mean, I'm sure it's just been a very frustrating season for Keegan Johnson and a frustrating last couple of years. But I think K-State fans, we're all frustrated too. Like you talk about, the frustrations with the offense earlier this year, a lot of that, like there was so much hype on Keegan Johnson and it's just been so incredibly disappointing. So.
Yeah, but hey, I mean, if Jace Brown's going to step up and be a guy that can provide you some of that, I mean, just get it done however you can.
Yeah, and I still think Garrett Oakley is going to come on. Got a touchdown wiped off the board for him, but made a really difficult catch in traffic on a third down conversion.
Yeah, I thought Garrett Oakley had a nice game.
Yeah, he's going to keep coming on. He's going to keep coming on. They'll have Ben Sennett. They'll keep getting guys, and they formed just a terrific tandem in the backfield with Trayshawn Ward and DJ Giddens. Those two have now rushed for over 1,000 yards, almost 1,100 yards combined. I mean, in our preseason preview pod, I think I asked you guys, like, do DJ Giddens and Trayshawn Ward rush for 800 yards or more each? And they're pacing toward that. Giddens is only 174 away from that, and Ward is about 350 away, maybe.
What I will say is they're doing it in a different way than maybe we had anticipated. But over the course of the last 2 games, I won't say 3 because one of those was Oklahoma State, I believe, they're giving – at this point, they've given defenses a lot to think about. Like,
yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, I just feel like I haven't shouted out the offensive line enough. I mean, John, you mentioned earlier K-State beef, and they took heat earlier in the year, but they are playing some incredible football up front. I mean, they're mauling guys. These holes are gigantic, and they're opening things up. And like they've got 7 guys that I think you can count on now up front. I think Carver Willis has just improved night and day. And I'm not sure if there's much of a difference between him and Christian Duffy. He's improved so much.
I mean, and the coaches will be like, I told you so, probably a little bit, and on some of these examples, but, they stuck with the guy when everyone else wanted him off the field, and now they're being rewarded for it.
Yeah, and that tends to happen, and I think, like, big picture take that I had from this game, too, is, like, and I freaked out as much as anybody after the Oklahoma State game. It was a pretty gross effort, but it seems like there's one of those every year, and we kind of freak out and panic, and they stay the course on things, and it generally pays off. And obviously we would love that they don't have the stinker every year to get everyone riled up, but you're right. It's to an extent that happens to everybody, and Kleiman's clearly proven he and his program are good enough to withstand things like that and just keep moving when everybody else starts bailing and jumping shit.
Every team lays a dud every year. You alluded to it. You'd like to think you're good enough to overcome it, but obviously sometimes you're not.
And when I think about the offensive line guys, I mean, people were like, well, who are they going to have next year up front? But now Carver Willis looks like a guy that you can certainly count on that'll be back next year. Hadley Panzer will be back. And then I'll tell you a guy that I think is coming on now that he's finally getting to play more football. I think people forget that Taylor Portier has hardly gotten to play any football because of the multiple injuries that he's suffered. Taylor Portier can come back next year too, and I think he's coming on as well at guard. So you start to look at it, you potentially have 3 starters, and then you got some young guys you feel good about next year that are coming back as well. So really good things up front from Connor Riley's group. They're playing really well, and I think one of my favorite plays was Cooper Beebe. It's a pancake block of that guy, and then just going and hitting another guy on that. They gave Avery like 10 seconds there on a passing play.
Yeah, that was pretty great. Now, as far as the defense goes, someone tweeted this at me. Shout out to KSU fan 360. Said someone has to ask, and defense lights out, phenomenal performance. Someone has to ask, but is K-State getting TCU's luck this season with backup QBs? Didn't have to play John Rice Plumlee, didn't have to play Tyler Shuck, didn't have to play Chandler Morris, and now because of the Quinn Ewers injury news, may well not have to play Quinn Ewers at Austin next week. I guess Donovan Smith should perhaps be careful walking around this week. I don't know what might be coming his way for Houston, but and I was like, look, I mean, there is an element to that they have been pretty fortunate in that regard, but they're still improving, and I'm not going to take anything away from what they've been able to do.
Yep, and a good point would be to make is Kansas State's playing a lot of backup quarterback too, so it's going around the league. They're not they're willingly doing it. That would be the difference. And TCU, I'll say this: the rest, yes, backup quarterback luck. Kansas State's getting it like TCU got last year, at least more than usual. But they probably still got the better TCU quarterback. That's all I'll say. Like, they probably would have been better off if they got Chandler Morris. Or Kansas State would have been worse off.
Maybe. I don't know. Maybe just that BYU is really not very good.
well, but I would also say that we thought TCU was a fraud, and I think part of that was because we knew Chandler Morris wasn't that good.
But then, John, I mean, I gave you a hard time about BYU, and then they dominated Texas Tech. I mean, I'm clearly wrong. I'm clearly wrong on Texas Tech.
Texas Tech is DEAD.
Here's the Texas Tech thing. They are going through 2020 Will Howard is what they're going through right now, with the fact that they're having to play a true freshman quarterback who's just needed more development. That was not a guy that was supposed to be playing immediately. Like that's what's that. So I think they're just pretty.
But I would say, to Cole's point, like that was happening in Texas Tech before this kid got on the field. Like they were a disaster.
Yeah, but they weren't. They could have beaten BYU with Baron Morton. Like they weren't that level bad. That kid's thrown 3 picks each of the last 2 weeks. Like they weren't that.
Yeah, right. They weren't that bad, but they were 4-3. Well, going to the Kansas State game, and considering their expectations, that was a disaster already. And in that form, and with Jake Strong, I get it. He's throwing 6 interceptions in 6 quarters.
Well, here's the thing. Texas Tech, Joey McGuire's got to look in the mirror and figure out what he's doing with his QB run game and getting guys hurt. Because last year they got Donovan Smith hurt, they got Baron Morton hurt, and they got Tyler Shuck hurt. And this year they've gotten Tyler Shuck hurt, Baron Morton hurt, and they're on a true freshman. I mean, you talk about K-State being frustrated fans with QB injuries. they're going through it 2 straight years at the quarterback spot. The Big 12 as an overall picture and outlook is really, it's hard to figure out, man. Now I'm a little worried about Oklahoma State in the Big 12 standings because they got the tiebreaker on K-State. And
have you seen the rest of their schedule?
I've seen the schedule.
They have 4 newcomers and then the Oklahoma game, which is at home. So
yeah.
What I will say is, like, Oklahoma State's another one of those teams that can beat everyone, they can lose to everyone.
Yeah, I looked at their schedule, and I think they'll drop one of those games that you look at right now, and you're like, oh, they're going to win. I think they'll drop one of those, and I think they'll lose to OU and Bedlam, and I think they'll end up 6-3. Which yeah.
Well, but I'm not say going back to Texas Tech a little bit, and I know you're on Oklahoma State, but we're all pointing the finger at the quarterback situation and the offensive situation. They haven't stopped anyone in like a month.
Yeah.
Who had
Texas Tech. They just give up a shit ton of points to BYU and Kansas State. Let's look at the defense a little bit here.
But John, you're right. I mean, I don't. Quinn Ewers is not going to play against K-State. I don't think they came out saying it was a grade 2 AC joint.
Grade 2 is usually 4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Probably not. That was the report from Pete Thamel yesterday was that he is going to miss, quote, some time. So
no, yeah. Grade 2 sprain is typically 4+ weeks. So I'd be shocked, and it's his throwing arm, right? So
it is.
Yeah, there's in 12 days from now. Yeah, it's hard to see. So
that's usually the recovery period for a grade 1, by the way.
Yeah, didn't Jalen Daniels have a AC joint sprain last year? Isn't that what it was for him? That missed like 4 or 5 weeks. Okay. Well,
yeah, but I would not be using Jalen Daniels as the barometer for typical recovery times.
I know. I got honest. But it changes things a little bit as you look ahead to the Texas game, right? I mean. Their backup quarterback, if they don't go to Arch Manning, their backup quarterback's more of a runner, right? Murphy.
He's huge. I mean, that is a load.
Oh, he's athletic, and
it doesn't make their offense less potent. It makes their receivers and their tight end weapons probably a little bit more limited.
Well, what I was going to say is Texas scares you because they got Xavier Worthy, they got Jatavion Sanders, they got AJ Mitchell. They got all those weapons at the skill positions, and if you can take some of those away because you got a quarterback that can't get it to him potentially, then I think that's significant.
You'll take all the help that you can get. I would also say Texas is probably the only team left on the Kansas State schedule that can beat Kansas State up at the line of scrimmage, though.
Yeah, I was going to say, is it too soon to get flashbacks and nightmares of Texas going Wildcat, and just line out like they did with Roshan Johnson against them in 2021?
The only team left on the Kansas State schedule, if Kansas State's playing their best game, that can compete with Kansas State at the line of scrimmage is Texas. And I don't think it's close.
No argument here on that.
KU's offensive line's not bad.
I was going to say, KU's offensive line's decent.
Yeah. But Baylor, Iowa State, Houston.
Well, with the couple minutes that we have left here, I do feel like we've omitted the defense a little bit in general. Anything that you want to get in about the defense and the defense's performance?
I would say as good as it was, and when you hold a Sonny Dykes offense to 3 points, when you hold in a TCU offense to 3 points, Cole told you the historical.
Excuse me, that's an upstanding human being, Kendall Bryle's offense to you, DY.
Oh, Drew Galloway, who works with me at KSO, had a good joke. So I guess it's probably something that he does every game. But Kendall Bryles ran around the football field probably at least 10 times before game, pregame, while the guys are stretching and doing their warm-ups. He's just running laps around the football field. And at the end of the game, Drew looks over at me and says, Kendall Bryles ran more laps than TCU scored points.
Hey.
So got him there. I would say just as good as that was by the Kansas State defense, nothing actually does really pop out as overly exceptional. It's not like they created 4 turnovers. They just kept getting stops because they tackled a hell of a lot better. You could tell they had a meeting of the minds on that front to kind of address that. Desmond Purnell did play elite. VJ Payne is playing elite right now as well. So those are 2 guys that maybe I would call out in terms of, whoa, you guys were phenomenal. But Joe Klanderman called a great game. And I thought the key was they never let Josh Hoover really throw with his feet set.
Yeah. Last 13 drives, K-State's allowed 3 points now. They had 9 drives defensively against TCU, 3 points allowed. And then four last 4 drives against Tech were 3 interceptions and a turnover on downs, albeit with a freshman quarterback in Jake Strong. So defense is playing really good football right now and starting to come on. I mean, you talked about it, DY. It was going to take some time for the defense to gel, and it looks like they may be reaching that point.
Yeah, and they probably still have some growing pains ahead of them. I don't know that I anticipated coming together this fast. So some of that was a product of a lot of things coming together for a really good night. So there's still some belly aches and headaches coming, I would imagine, especially with Texas remaining on the schedule and having a night game, probably a night game on the road at KU. That is a tricky offense to prepare for, but one game at a time, right? Yeah. So Houston's next week, and early forecasts suggest we're about to get some real fall weather, maybe winter weather.
Yeah, there's a chance of some rain, which, hey, K-State will just run the hell out of the ball, right? And have another game of 200-plus yards on the ground.
Yeah, Patrick Gomba visiting this weekend, so people need to be pumped for that. Basketball, 5-star.
Wait, is there a chance of rain or winter weather? Like, which is it?
Well, I was told there's a big cold front. It'll be in the 30s, so it could be.
I don't think it's going to be in the 30s, DY. Come on. It's going to be the high's like 58. So,
is that bad for Ngongba? Can we request
if they lose Gongba because it rains, John? Like, come on.
We'll just put him up. We'll put him up in a suite. Well, the high's 51 now with a low of 43 and 50% chance of rain. This just gets back to why haven't we built a retractable roof? I mean, look, we're $1 billion university with elite wealth, wealthy donors. It's time to build a dome. So,
if only we had somebody that worked for a giant conglomerate that could pay for that very, very easily to, coax some donations headed our way to make that happen.
I know, Paul, what are you doing right now? So
I did coax, so I think he was talking something else.
I don't know.
Is that a Paul Edgerly shout out there? Is that what that was?
Right. I didn't want to call him up by his last name, but
okay.
Paul, let's go forward.
As a host of the show, I feel like that had to be addressed so that someone wasn't like, Paul, who's Paul?
I'll find
Paul. Well, yeah, Feinbaum wanted to make a donation. That would be great. Okay, I guess on that, yeah, we should probably call it there. Let's try to give the defense a little more love on the next show. All right, feel like we didn't do enough.
It was just so businesslike. I mean, there wasn't like I don't know what necessarily. I struggle to call it out. I mean, I did like a rapid recap for KCSN after the game. My parents were listening to it, and they're like, "You didn't talk about the defense at all." I was like, "Yeah, gosh, I'm sorry." Well, I had to cut the last part where I did talk about the defense because of length. But yeah, no, they kind of got overshadowed in this one, and they're playing good football. So
Desmond Purnell, hell of a pick. Should have had another. So
should we have Purnell on as the player spotlight this week?
I like that. Yeah,
who should we have?
That'll be good. Ask him about playing in the old Centennial League, man. I remember him from the Centennial League days.
Yeah. Did you know he was going to be this good?
I did not. No.
John was all over Damon Elalio. That's his guy.
He was a stud, man. He was a stud at MHS.
Mike McCoy.
Oh, Mike McCoy was the most dominant player I've seen in the Centennial League, dude. He killed people.
Yeah. But I was all over Avery Johnson. I thought Avery Johnson was going to be a good player. So
I don't know how you ever were able to tell, man. That seems like a great scouting eye that you got right there. Okay. Appreciate our friends at Holiday Distillery. Get your 360 vodka, your Ben Holiday bottle, and Bond bourbon. Go to homefieldapparel.com. Use promo code 3MOD23 to get 15% off your first order. We appreciate the help of Nick Springer behind the scenes. For Derek Young and Cole Manbeck, I am John Kurtz. Thanks for listening to another 3MOD. Take care, and we'll talk to you soon.